industry expert, Patricia has led trend seminars and contributed to articles for Womenswear Daily, Teen Vogue, Nylon, and other industry publications. Patricia holds an associate degree in fashion marketing, a bachelor's degree in social communications, and a Master of Arts in Fashion and Cultural Studies from Parsons School of Design. So last week I polled you guys at the end of class asking about your experience with Fashion Snoops, and here are the results. And I was very surprised that only 6.5% of you say you use it all the time. I think as designers, this is a resource that's really very helpful and something that I know designers in the industry use quite a bit. So the more comfortable you guys can get with it today, hopefully the more you can use it as you move forward. Only about 32% of you say you've used it once or twice. A bunch of you have heard of it but not used it. And then those of you who have no idea how to access and never heard of it, I want to make sure that I show you that now. So I have posted here, and this chart will be available for you guys as always after the fact on the Blackboard site. But I wanted to take you through the library. You actually have free access through FIT. If you go to FIT Library Databases and then hit F for Fashion Snoops, it will take you here to this page. And once you do that, you guys will see actually here. Users are required to create an account, and then trend reports and forecasting is used for fashion, and it says the servers that you can use the best. It's gonna be funny for me on this computer here, but I wanted to make sure you guys knew how to get here and how to access it. So go to the library and then databases, and then F for Fashion Snoops. And then I am going to open the trend report on Fashion Snoops, and Patricia's gonna come talk you guys through it. And one more flash of the attendance if you guys missed it in the first place. If anyone's having any issues, please be sure to email me or see me after class. I'll just let this go for 1 second. All right. Everyone all good?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Caroline, for having me here. So I'm Patricia. I'm the Director of Womenswear at Fashion Snoops. And for the 16% of you who have no idea who we are and what we do, we are a trend forecasting agency with over 20 years in the market. And in simple terms, we try to forecast what's going to be a trend 2 years in advance. Everything we do at Fashion Snoops comes from understanding cultural and social shifts that are happening and how that will impact different markets, including womenswear. So here I brought, just so you have an idea, one of our forecasts for Spring/Summer 23. Each season we do 5 of these. They try to convey what the design aesthetic is for a cultural sentiment. In this case, we're talking about raw. So just a little intro here. We explain why we think this cultural sentiment is important and how it will translate in terms of aesthetic. Here we saw a consumer yearning towards everything that is raw and natural and ancestral. I think this really comes from the chaotic lives that we're living. So I think consumers will try to kind of go back to the roots and really try to strip away all the chaos that is in our lives. We always present a little introduction about the sentiment here and how will that impact design aesthetics. And we create a little video because I feel like it's very important to show an aesthetic in several ways. So we do have a beautiful mood board that we do in-house, but we also do these videos. Can I go ahead and play? So as you guys could see, here we draw reference for fashion as well as home and interiors, accessories, textiles. This is a cross-market forecast. We later down the road, we break that down in different markets. But here, this is the first forecast that we do each season. That's why it encompasses all the different markets. We always present a mood board. Again, here the idea is to really inspire designers as well as buyers and merchandisers to start thinking about the season. And for this season, we were thinking about this raw aesthetic, going back to the artisans that create the textiles, this really beautiful mood board here. We always do a color forecast for each of these sentiments. Here, as you can see, we really wanted to bring a lot of natural elements. So we have, this beautiful brown colors here. Towards the end, we see, the liveliness that comes through with the greens. We also wanted to bring a lot of neutrals as well. We are seeing this shift towards more natural, undyed materials. That's why we have these sort of like undyed hemp colors here as well. And, this is a palette that will likely inspire different collections coming out for Spring Summer 23. Then we present color usage, and this is to really inspire designers to think about different color combinations. So for example, we can create a palette here with different neutrals. We also bring some really vibrant natural colors here. So really the idea is to inspire different color combinations. And then each of these design aesthetics are broken down into 3 design pillars. So these are important considerations when we're thinking about the raw aesthetic. The first one is honest form, and here we're really thinking about stripping down all the excess to really focus on the item itself. We create here some callouts for different elements that we see in this pillar. So like I said, the idea of undyed fabrics and, the beauty that comes from these very raw, natural fibers. In terms of silhouettes, we're thinking about very crisp and sculptured silhouettes. So we're seeing this in the rounded shoulders as well as, the puff sleeves. Natural strength here applies to either woven or knitted materials. So really thinking about these different types of textures. Elongated comfort speaks to loungewear and how we're seeing these really elongated silhouettes coming through, as well as low impact. And I think that's really important in terms of sustainability. I was really inspired by this designer called Angel Chang, I think that's her name, and she claims that she designs only using natural resources, which means the natural light from the sun, the water from the mountains. So all her production process is really raw and still very refined as well. So low impact was something that was really important for us in this forecast. Now the second pillar is quiet collaboration, and here we're really thinking about how nature can help designers to create something that is even more beautiful. One of the inspirations here for me was, I don't know if you guys have seen, but this project called Full Grown Chair, and it's basically this couple who grows trees in the form of a chair. So there's actually no extra waste. They don't have to send, the wood to the factory to turn into a chair. It actually grows as a chair. So I think for me that was really inspiring, how we can actually create alongside nature. Some of the elements that we're calling out here in this pillar are co-design. So, starting with the idea that, nature can be a co-designer as well. So how do we, instead of trying to shape what nature is, how do we co-design with it? And another example here is this designer whose garments are all supposed to be tied or styled in different ways, so the consumer becomes the co-designer with the designer itself. Also, we're talking about these very delicate frameworks, so I love this crochet top from Chloe. And we're seeing these really intricate frameworks that create a really beautiful pattern. Resourceful creation, also another sustainability call out here. As you can see in this overall design aesthetic, sustainability is something really important. So for example, the two examples that we see here, one is from Bode and the other one is Lemaire. And these are both upcycled, so upcycled fabrics as well as upcycled elements for the purse. So how do we think of design as being upcycled, and how can we be resourceful with the elements that we already have? Leave a trace is a call out for pattern and graphics, but can also be applied to different types of textures. I think that's really interesting how we kind of like borrow this inspiration from nature. And sculpted by nature, here we wanted to bring that silhouette call out, something that has texture, still feels very raw, but is still created with nature. So you still see imperfections, but that's what makes the garment interesting. And the last pillar here is wild abundance. So we really started to think about how consumers are not only thinking about buying a garment, but trying to understand the origins, who made these clothes, who, and even going all the way to the seeds, who's growing these seeds. So that was something that for us was really important to discuss in this pillar. We started to see a lot of conversations around farm to shelf. So I think this conversation really goes into this pillar as well. So really trying to understand who are these people who are growing the cotton, who are the farmers who are really in the very beginning process of the whole industry. One of the call-outs here is dried craft. So we were really inspired by, the raw botanicals and this really like raw dried aesthetic that comes through these really beautiful dried botanicals. Earth waste, another sustainability call out here, super important for us to understand how can we use what's already here and how can we make it beautiful. So really rethinking ways of using waste in design. Some other call outs, we have sun printing, also something that we have been seeing a lot of designers doing now, utilizing the sun as a form of print. And natural adornment, also super interesting in terms of creating textures as well as using, like I said, natural elements incorporated into the design. And we always kind of like try to pull everything together. So like I said, at Fashion Snoops, everything that we do starts from really understanding macro trends. So every season we do we forecast 5 major cultural trends. Return to Wild and Course Correct were 2 of them. Return to Wild really speaks to the idea of sustainability and how consumers are now trying to sort of go back to our natural state. And Course Correct is something more of how brands are trying to really correct the path that they were going. So really looking into sustainability and better ways of doing what they've been doing for so long. Combining those 2 macro trends, we arrived at the cultural sentiment raw, and what you guys just saw was this little piece here that is the design aesthetic. So how do we translate this cultural sentiment that we're feeling into an aesthetic, and how that can, inspire designers and buyers and merchandisers. And that was the example. So images and inspiration can come from anywhere. Personally, I find a lot of inspiration and a lot of images that I find beautiful on Instagram. I follow a lot of photographers from brands, so they can come from anywhere. Pinterest could be a source of inspiration too. I personally look into Instagram because I follow a lot of photographers and a lot of design magazines as well.
Do you, Greg,
No, we don't, because, they are in the web, so they are available to use. We do credit all of them.
Do you guys have in-house stylists for the shoots and people who kind of put like the outfits together?
No, so all of these are from lookbooks, from collections, from runway. So we don't actually style anything. We just kind of like create all these collages based on the images that we already have. So we don't shoot anything.
Any more questions about the specific presentation, you guys can ask at the end too. Is it okay to speak into the microphone? 'Cause I think that So I would love if you could share with us how you got here, what your career path was before Fashion Snoops.
All right, so my career path is not as streamlined as I guess most people think.
Always the more interesting stories.
I actually, as you guys saw, started as a copywriter in advertising agencies. So I graduated from social communications and marketing and started working as a copywriter. Then around 2010, I would say, I just thought I wasn't doing exactly what I wanted to do. Don't get me wrong, I didn't hate my job or anything, but I just wasn't fully happy. So that's when I decided that I wanted a career change, and I knew that I wanted to work in fashion. So I decided to go back to school. So I got my associates in fashion marketing, and then I started working as a merchandiser, which was great because, I was working in the industry that I wanted. But after a few years, I also thought that I wasn't completely happy. I hadn't landed yet where I wanted to be because I started to miss being creative. So, in advertising agencies, you are allowed to be as creative as possible and, thinking about concepts and all of these more conceptual things. And as a merchandiser, I wasn't fully doing that because, of course, you have to follow a line sheet. You have to build the collection, based on what is going to sell. So it just came to me that fashion forecasting was something that would combine both the creative part as well as working in fashion, which is what I loved. So again, I decided to go back to school. And for me, I think finding the master's program that I did was really interesting because it was exactly what I needed at the time. It was about studying fashion and culture and how that shapes different trends. So I thought that was exactly what I wanted to do if I wanted to switch careers and go into trend forecasting. So that's what I did. While I was doing my master's, I started interning at Fashion Snoops, and I'm there still.
That's great.
Yeah.
Have you always been in womenswear at
Yes.
Fashion Snoops?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Can you talk about what the job of a copywriter entails?
Yeah, so a copywriter writes copy, right? So all the text that you see in different advertisements, or I also wrote a lot of scripts for commercials, so everything that involves writing.
Yeah, cool. Can you talk about, I feel like you maybe touched on it a bit as you were going through this, but talk about your current process, like how you first, get inspired by certain ideas and then how you flesh it out from there.
Mm-hmm. So every season we begin with a meeting that all the editors, and we're talking about like 45 people coming together and really fleshing out all the ideas they have, everything they're feeling. It could be anything from, a mood board to just something that they read, to this inspiring song that they heard. And then we have this whole day meeting where everybody's just kind of like pitching their ideas. After that meeting, we have a smaller group of people, me included, and we sort of try to combine these different ideas into different buckets, let's say. So overall, like for example, in this one, we started to see that a lot of people were feeling, this raw aesthetic, or some people were pitching about sustainability. And, these are people also who work there who are always trying to look around and try to see what is bubbling up. So we begin the season like that. Then we come up with 4 cultural sentiments, raw included. That was one of them for Spring Summer 23. After that, we then break the sentiment into design aesthetics. So if you say raw, what does that look like in terms of design? So then a smaller group of people create this report that you guys just saw. So trying to translate that sentiment into an aesthetic. After that, then we go into each other's markets to try to see how each market is translating that aesthetic into their own ways. So in women's wear, after I do the design aesthetic, then we do what we call seasonal narratives. So those are more of like thematic stories. And that's something that clients really love because, they need to create these little stories to create collections. So then we translate this sentiment into actual women's wear garments. After that, then we do trend stories, which are smaller pieces of a seasonal narrative. So it's a long process, but we want to show how these big macro trends are translated into the very specific items that you need to include in your collection. So we go through this whole process.
Very cool. And how's your team structured?
So my team is quite small, actually. We are 4 people. There's a VP of Women's Wear. Her name is Melissa Moylan. Then I'm the director of Women's Wear. And then we have 2 editors who are now called strategists. And yeah, so it's a small team in Women's Wear. But I think it's good that, we have good communication always because we're such a small team.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. How did you get your first job out of school?
I got my first job out of school through an internship. So both right after college and after my master's, those were both through internships. And I feel like I can't stress enough how important it is. If you really want to get a job in a certain area or even a specific company, I think it's really important for you to try to be there already. From my experience at least, that was really helpful that I was already interning there.
Yeah. And is there anything that you feel like you would have done differently in college to prepare you for the path that you ended up taking?
So, like I mentioned, my path is really like all over the place, kind of, but I would not do anything differently. I feel like somehow everything that, all the different paths and careers and schools and whatnot are all combined into this job that I have right now. Like, I feel like working in advertising was really helpful for me to think conceptually, was really helpful for me to write better. Then working in merchandising was really helpful to understand how collections are built, to really understand the fashion industry from the inside, what merchants and buyers are thinking when they're creating their collections. And then I think everything that I did kind of like somehow combined now into this job. And I feel like I wouldn't really change my path during college.
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned obviously you went back for your master's. Did you find that experience worthwhile?
For sure. I feel like it was the most challenging and rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. It's obviously not easy. At least the program that I was in was, it demanded a lot of time and a lot of work. It was a lot of reading, writing, researching. But I think, definitely worth it. I feel like I wouldn't be thinking about certain concepts if I didn't go through that master's. Like, you start to question culture. You start to question why do we dress like we do? Like, why do we have like these gender binaries? Why is fast fashion the way it is? So I think those bigger concepts were something that I don't think I would be thinking if I didn't get the master's.
Yeah, that's great. Can you describe for us what an entry-level job would look like at Fashion Snoops, when someone first enters into the company, what they would do?
So a lot of what we do at Fashion Snoops is forecast, but another important part that we do is covering what's happening now in retail. So not just looking ahead, 2 years ahead in what's going to be a trend, but also understanding what is a trend right now. So that's quite important for us. So an entry-level job would be focused in tracking the trends on the retail level. At Fashion Snoops, we developed a AI tool that helps us to track all the items that are on retail right now.
Oh, wow.
So our strategists are focused on, really keeping track of, what's on trend, what's happening at Zara, what's happening at different stores across the world, and coming up with monthly retail reports where we tell our clients what are the colors that are happening now, details, materials, fabrics, prints, everything that's happening now in retail. Another important portion is trade shows. So we cover most of the trade shows for womenswear, the ones in Vegas, we have some in Europe. So our strategists are also either going to these shows and actually going into the booths and talking to the brands and understanding what they're selling for the next season, what are the trends that they're seeing. So that's also something that we want, an entry-level job
Person to do,
Yeah.
I mean, because basically Fashion Snoops gets to be the eyes and ears for a lot of people in the industry who cannot physically get to every single trade show.
Right.
Cannot get to stores as often as they'd like. So you guys kind of become this resource for them
Right.
to.
Yeah, and especially I think with the pandemic, a lot of our clients just can't travel anymore, so they really rely on us to, be going through retail stores, going through trade shows, and telling them specifically what are the trends that we're seeing.
Yeah.
Because, there's a lot of clutter, like there's just so much happening. So I think part of what we do is to bring to the surface what are the most relevant trends and why do we think that's going to sell, or why do we think that that's new and interesting, and how does that relate back to what's happening culturally.
Yeah. And so what does your hiring process look like? What kind of qualities are you looking for in candidates?
I personally look for someone who obviously is very motivated. I think, it is a fast-paced job in a way, so you really want to have someone who has passion for the job and also just has a good eye to spot trends, if that makes sense. I feel like someone who's always sort of like paying attention to what's cool and what's new, and like understanding that, sort of like seeing like, oh, I've never seen this before, that's cool, and then trying to make connections to something else that they saw. And, references and trends can come from anywhere, I feel like. So even if you're like at a coffee shop and you think that, oh, this color that they painted the wall is really cool, and then you start seeing that in something else, I feel like that sort of eye
obviously something that can be trained, but it's something that is really interesting to me to see someone who can spot things that are happening around
Connected.
you. Yeah.
Cool. That's really cool. So you touched a little on how you keep yourself informed with the latest trends, or I don't know if there's anything else that you feel like is worth sharing.
Yeah, I think obviously just keeping an eye open all the time. I feel like I joke around and I say I'm always working, but I really am always working, because even if I'm just sitting at home on Instagram, I'm always trying to see like, oh, that's really cool, and I start saving that image. Or if I'm just walking around in New York City, or even if I'm sitting here looking at you guys, I'm already kind of like, oh, that's really cool. I haven't seen that before. So that's one way. Obviously, keeping up to date with industry news, runway shows, all of that is also important.
And are you doing much travel now?
We just started traveling again. Yeah.
Where are like the hot spots that you guys typically, in normal times, travel to?
So our strategist just came back from Vegas. There was a big show there. I will be going to Paris, I think, in June. There's going to be some shows in intimate apparel. One of the things that I didn't mention is that we also have, within womenswear, we have intimate apparel and swimwear, so I also cover those markets as well. But yeah, big cities, and we do have researchers, local researchers all over the world, so they're also keeping us up to date in what's happening in those cities.
Oh, wow. How many people do you have around the world?
I feel like we must have about like 10 different researchers. We have also offices in Paris and in Sao Paulo.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So obviously sustainability is a big hot-button topic, and the trend that you just showed us kind of highlighted that in a big way. I mean, is there anything else surrounding sustainability that you feel like is really important for students to be aware of?
Yeah, I think sustainability is just, not even a trend anymore. It's really a must-have for every single company and, upcoming designers to think about. I'm very passionate about this subject because I wrote my thesis on this.
Oh, wow.
But, I feel like there's so much greenwashing happening too, and I think it's just something to pay attention to, because that's definitely not something you want to do or be part of. But what I think is interesting is that there's so many ways that we can approach sustainability now, especially, from the very fiber that we're growing, like I showed in the forecast, but also we're seeing a lot of different brands doing resale programs. We're seeing obviously a lot of innovations in the materials front, so switching, from, let's say, leather to vegan leather and stuff like that. And overall, just also rethinking collections, like, do we really need 52 drops a year? Maybe seasonless collections could be a solution. So really I think the opportunity now is to really rethink the whole system instead of just thinking about fibers and materials.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the waste that ends up happening at the end of the season,
Mm-hmm.
which,
Yeah.
even if you have the best, most sustainable product, it's still not good if there's nowhere for it to go at the end of the day. What do you feel like has been the most fulfilling part of your career so far?
Honestly, I think what's really fulfilling to me is to see, previous interns doing really well. So I've had like interns that got hired at Gucci or, the brands that they wanted to work for. And I think that's really fulfilling to me to kind of think that I had a little part on this story. I've also had interns being hired at Fashion Snoops. So I think that's really fulfilling.
Yeah, that's great. Kind of more flip side of that question is, I don't know if you have a story that you feel like you want to share and a lesson learned where you had a failure that, you were able to kind of turn around and make it something better.
I think there were a lot of failures during the pandemic. I think not just for Fashion Snoops, but I think for a lot of brands and designers, it was a very challenging moment. Obviously, when the pandemic hit, we all went remote, so that was, a big challenge. Like, how do we do this? We never worked remote before. Then we, of course, unfortunately lost a few clients, so how do we deal with that? At the time, too, we had to furlough some people, so, I had double the work, so we had to learn how to prioritize what was most important at that moment. So I think, that was a very challenging time not just for Fashion Snoops, but for the entire industry.
Yeah, true. Any COVID silver linings that have come out of it?
Yeah, I think there was so many learnings from that whole period. Right now we don't have an office, like I mentioned to you earlier. We're all doing this hybrid work, and I think that works for us really well. We, of course, have some moments when, a few of us meet in New York to do, for example, color, because we actually need to see the swatches. But yeah, I think overall, obviously the pandemic's not over, but overall I think we got through it, and now we're getting our clients back, and I think we're kind of seeing a better future now. Different, but better.
Yeah. I don't know if you're able to share, but who are some of your biggest clients that you work with?
We work a lot with Target, Kohl's, Timberland, Wacol, and we have partnerships with different trade shows as well.
Yeah. And is there a next level in partnership? I mean, obviously, any designer is able to subscribe and access your website, but I don't know if there's like different levels that you guys actually provide.
We do consulting as well. So those are side projects. So if you're a client, you have access to the site and all the reports that we post there. But we do a lot of consulting projects where, a client can come to us and be like, I need help building my, fall winter 24 collection. So we create these tailored projects for them.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
What would be your number one piece of advice for anyone who's kind of looking to get into trend forecasting or editorial work like you've done?
I think understanding what trend forecasting is, I think, is quite important. Sometimes I feel like, some people have no idea what it is. Which is fine. I don't expect everyone to know, but I think if you want to get into that area, I think having an understanding of that and the industry as well. I think in editorial, clear writing is always beneficial, but overall, I feel like work ethics is good for every single profession that you want to follow. So
yeah. Well, that's great. Thank you. Those are all my questions, but I want to give the students some time to ask. Whoever's first, so I don't know if you want it to be, but would you mind grabbing the microphone? Thank you. Your hand did shoot right up. Thank you. You might just need to flick it on, too. Yeah. Perfect.
I just wanted to ask, not to at all minimize, I know so much research and process and all that goes into the trend forecasting. But do you think there's a little bit of like self-fulfilling prophecy that trend forecasting companies say, here's what's going to be popular 2-3 years from now, and then all the brands go, all right, and then it becomes popular because of, like a little bit?
I definitely heard that before too. I don't think so. I feel like because everything that we do, we research what's happening in terms of culture and social events, and we're not making that up. I think that is a given. Like we all know how everyone is feeling in terms of being more sustainable, or how everyone is feeling in terms of gender identities or different movements like Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. So all our forecast comes from understanding those social and cultural shifts, and therefore we come up with these forecasts. So in my opinion, no. And I think, even though we create these forecasts, the clients are always able to tailor that to their customers as well. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does.
It's like the Devil Wears Prada cerulean blue speech, if you guys know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yes.
I would like to think that we have that much power, but I don't think so.
Do you guys know what the difference is between a trend and a forecast, or a trend report and a forecast? I can see some heads bobbing. Patricia was kind of touching on how her strategists will be calling out trends that they're seeing, like things that they're actually witnessing on the streets, seeing in the stores. It's happening in real time. That's a trend report versus a forecast, which is something that was just presented to us, which is really forward-looking and trying to pick up on those macro trends right now and how they are going to evolve over the next couple of years and get there. So I think that's the resource that's really helpful, particularly when you are working for a commercial designer and trying to appeal to the mass consumers, that you want to be ahead of the curve and know what's coming down the pike for a forecast.
Hi. What is a good way for designers who are just starting out to get a handle on trend forecasting in order to grow their business? Are they able to consult with Fashion Snoops just like larger companies?
Well, I think, if you have access to Fashion Snoops, you have the same access that all these big brands like, Target and Michael Kors and whatnot, they all have access to the same information. And I think what you do with that forecast is something that is much more personal too. So even if you see this forecast and Target sees this forecast too, you're both going to create different collections or different stories based on that. So yeah, I think, even as a new designer, if you have access, you can still be inspired by it and then kind of tailor it to your own customer or your own taste or what you think will fit better in your collection. And like I said, we do 4 of these each season. So maybe, this one it doesn't appeal to you. It's not like what you're going for, your brand. But we do 3 other ones, and they're all connected to different macro trends and cultural sentiments.
Thank you.
Continuing off of that question, does Target pay the same amount to access your services as a small designer, or a small company with, say, 3 people? Target is so much bigger than a small company. Is that fair?
I don't know pricing for sure, but we do charge per seat, I believe. So if Target has 12 people accessing our site, they pay for 12 seats, whereas you pay for 1 if you just want to have 1 account.
That's my experience too from the industry, that
Thank you.
you have a certain number of people who can access it.
And also, if you just want to access women's, I think it's 1 price. If you want to access the whole site, it's a different price. I think that's how it works. But I'm not entirely sure about pricing.
But it is a huge perk that you get to access it for free. Hopefully you guys know about all the databases, but Fashion Snoops being one of the great ones that's available here at FIT. So,
Thank you.
Right behind you.
Hello, this is a little bit going in a separate direction from where the questions were going to, but we all know COVID changed our perspective in a lot of things. But before this happened, you had already forecasts done. Do you think, in your opinion, COVID completely changed the way we saw things, or that it just made it more quickly, in a way?
Very good question. I think it kind of like confirmed a lot of the feelings that we were already feeling prior to COVID. One thing that we did different, though, when the pandemic hit, we started doing more strategic reports. So, how do you merchandise a collection that you already bought, and how you pivot in that way. But I think the overall cultural feeling, it was more of like a confirmation that we were already feeling prior to COVID.
Thank you.
But it was really interesting to do the forecast after COVID, not after because not over, but I think one of the ones that we were really excited about is like one that is called Release. And it's really like this idea of like, what do we do after this is over? And like with all these, pent-up feelings that you have inside, and how would that translate into fashion? I feel like that was one of, my favorite forecasts that we did.
Yeah. Cool.
Hi. First, I just wanted to say that I'm going into my senior year. I'm a fashion designer, and I personally use Fashion Snoops like basically on a daily basis.
Nice.
It's helped me in every single beginning process I've ever had. It really like helps me solidify what I want to design. So I just want to say I really love it.
Nice,
but
thank you.
Oh,
One of
of
the
course.
6.5% right there.
But I wanted to ask what advice you would give, because you did have a few career pivots.
Right.
Something that I'm having a feeling is probably going to happen to me as well. But I wanted to ask what advice you would give to someone who wants to kind of venture in a new direction, but they don't really know. Like, for example, I'm graduating with my design degree, but writing is also something that I've always been very interested in, and maybe another aspect of the fashion industry would interest me as well, but I'm not really sure how to venture into that.
Well, first, thank you for your comment. I'm really glad that it's helping you. In terms of the career, like I said, I feel like you should try to intern as much as possible to really see what you want to do. At least that's what I did when I was doing, I think, my associates. I was interning in PR, in wholesale, in merchandising, in like all these different things. And, obviously every experience is very valuable, even if it is to show that you hate it and you don't want to do it. And I think there's always, at least from my experience, when I changed careers, I was probably like almost 30. And, I feel like there's always a way that if you're not happy with what you're doing, like you just try to like find a way to like maybe, you do like a 6 months internship somewhere, and then you see if that's what you like or not. I think to answer to your question, I think interning in different, companies or different positions is something that for me was really helpful to see what I wanted to do. Because honestly, like you don't know what you like and what you want to do until you're actually doing it. So I think, one thing is to learn at school. Like at school, I didn't even know there was trend forecasting, like that existed. And I feel like once you do it, then you're like, oh, okay, so this is what they mean, this is what they do. So I feel like it's very important to try to get hands-on experience as much as possible.
Thank you. Also, just kind of a follow-up to that would be, like, how would you actually be able to get these internships if it's something that's so new to you? Like, how are you able to have these companies hire you if you don't necessarily have the experience or that much knowledge because you've studied in another field?
So for me, I was studying in fashion when I got my internship in fashion. So it really doesn't matter if you're doing like a design major and then you want to intern, let's say at Fashion Snoops. We don't design anything, but we still hire people that are in design too. Yeah, so I think, applying for different internships, I feel like it's not, the industry is not that closed off where, they're going to see your major and they're going to be like, oh my gosh, no, she studies design, she doesn't fit here. I think especially if you still want to be in fashion, in some sort of even editorial, writing for fashion, I think it's still pretty open. I've hired people from, isn't there, I think at FIT there is a textile degree. I know
There's a textile design degree.
Yeah, we have a lot of people at Fashion Snoops who did that major here too.
Really?
So yeah, I think the strategist that I just hired for our team, he comes from a PR background. But he applied, we interviewed him, he seemed to be very eager. And like I said, but that's just me personally too. I feel like I can relate to people who want to change careers. And I think, if you show interest, you show that you understand where you're getting into, I feel like it's definitely valuable to at least apply for an internship and see if you like it.
Thank you so much.
And I think also if you leave here, and forgive me if I'm repeating something that's maybe been covered in prior classes, but if you leave here and you go to a large company and you're on one path and you're not 100% sure of that path, it is so great to just have some like internal interviews with people around the company, asking them about their roles. If it's a large enough company that you can do that, because you can learn a lot more about what goes on in different sectors of the company just by these little conversations, and then you can start pursuing it that way. It's like a good way to get in, kind of get a foot in the door. If that makes sense.
Thank you. That's so exciting. I'm always wondering, like, you never really know where you're going to end up. Even if you get a job, necessarily you may not end up staying at that job. It's just exciting. It is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Definitely one of the themes of this class. I don't think we ever have anyone in here who's like, I got this job and this is the only job I've ever done and I've never switched. So a lot of people do.
Hello. So I was just wondering, do you think that sustainability is heading in a good direction as of right now? Because we haven't seen much like growth as far as like recycled materials in the industry. And I guess I was also wondering about like the fashion calendar and if that plays a big role in that, and if it's changing because of the pandemic.
In terms of the sustainability, I feel like it's not going in the pace that it should be going, for sure. There are some really great examples that at least I've been seeing in terms of new innovations in materials, or these big companies at least trying to start a conversation. I agree with you. I feel like it's not as fast as we need it to be, but there are some great examples that are happening in the industry now. A bit too late, but the conversation is there. What was the second question?
Just that how is the fashion calendar like changing since the pandemic, and how is that affecting the sustainability as well?
The traditional fashion calendar hasn't really changed. I think the fashion weeks are still the same as they always were. What I've been noticing personally that is changing is a lot of brands, a lot of our clients are pushing their calendar even earlier than before, which is pretty concerning actually, but that's because of the supply chain problems that they had during the pandemic. So now, our forecasts for, let's say, fall/winter 24, which weren't going to be posted until like mid-April are now live on the site because these clients want to start producing way earlier than before because of the pandemic. So that, I feel like that will change. I feel like these big brands are trying to start production earlier, which was already so early, and now it's even more.
So do you think that's going to have a negative effect on the sustainability for the future of the industry?
I think the pace of the industry is a problem in terms of sustainability, yes. I think, trying to, if you think about the supply chain as a whole, and you're trying to, squeeze these very tight deadlines on, the very bottom of the supply chain is a problem, not just in terms of the sustainability of it, but also the social problems that it brings. I think it will be a problem too if we try to have everything earlier than ever, and if that continues to increase.
Okay, thank you.
Hi there. Thank you for being here. You mentioned that you guys aim to forecast 2 years ahead, if I'm not mistaken. How do you sort of gauge that time period, and is it possible to gauge further, or are there certain factors that shorten that window? And I guess how far do you think you can, or maybe how far, like in the past, have you seen like, oh, we guessed that like 4 years in advance, or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
How do you gauge it?
So because we work with a culture team that is looking at these macro trends, it's for us as a company that are serving clients, real clients that are putting out collections, we put a season and a year in that forecast to guide our clients. But of course, we can't say that like, oh, sustainability is going to be this thing in 2024, and then in 2025 it disappears. I think these conversations evolve. Trends evolve, actually, and so even though we have this year that is 2 years in advance to help our clients because they are building their collections in this manner, doesn't mean that that forecast or that way of thinking or that cultural shift is going to stop in that year. It can extend to several more years, and it can change, in 2025, 2026.
Thank you.
Hi. Do you think you're harshly contributing to sustainability by posting your trend reports earlier to accommodate these clients?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Sure. So you mentioned that you posted, that usually you guys post your trend reports like at a set time, but you've had clients wanting to produce sooner,
Mm-hmm.
and that makes you guys post your trend reports sooner. Do you
Mm-hmm.
think that's negatively impacting sustainability?
I don't think so. I feel like, we are serving the industry, and if the industry is pushing their calendar earlier, obviously it's not the whole industry that's doing this. This is like big corporations who, are producing all over the world. But we're still serving smaller clients who still keep the same production schedule. They just have the forecast earlier, which could be helpful for them too, to have more time to develop their collections.
Anyone else in the back? No? Down here again.
Another question that just came to my mind. So you research a lot and you come up with these forecasts. What's the biggest shock you've received? Like, oh, we didn't expect this. And then like a switch from one year to another one. What has been like the biggest shock so far culturally or in the trends?
I think, like I mentioned, I think the pandemic was a big shock. Like nobody was expecting that, and I think obviously we didn't do any forecast on that. So I think that was something that kind of like was unexpected. Yeah, I think that for sure was something really unexpected. I think all of these social movements that are not bubbling up, but they just kind of like happen, even though, obviously the pandemic is not a social movement, but, all of these events that are not like bubbling up and that we can feel it and then we can predict, something that just happens like that is something that kind of like makes us sort of like go back and like, let's see what we did for that season. Let's see if it's still valid.
Thank you.
Down here. You can pass it across, maybe.
Hi, I was just wondering if you could talk about how Fashion Snoops differs from other trend websites and forecasters like WGSN, or like why do your clients choose to work with you think?
So yes, our biggest, I guess, competitor is WGSN. I've never worked there, so I don't quite know. Obviously, I know their website and their content. What I think makes us different, first of all, we are a family-owned company. So our directors, CEO and CFO, are a couple. We are a smaller company as well, which means that we are much tighter in a way, and it's much easier for us to implement changes. So I feel like we are very open to, at least I am very open to hearing feedback from my clients. And if they say, it would be really interesting to see like a forecast on this specific topic, it's really easy for us to just implement that change right away and do that forecast and have different teams collaborate, which I feel like is the benefit of having a smaller company. Fashion Snoops is also positioned as sort of like a full hub where you can not only see the reports, but you can also create your own mood boards, you can create your own folders, you can use it as a resource to store images, to store videos, to build color palettes. So I think the positioning there is a little different. We just don't serve forecasts, but we kind of create this whole website where, we're combining artificial intelligence plus all this collage building thing with the forecast as well. I believe that's the difference.
Back over here. Is that something you could show us?
No.
No, okay.